Hey, Bobby. Hey, Scott. Is the account of the ascension only in Luke's narrative? Or do any of the other gospel writers cover that? And, what's the, is the
Bible
motive
trivia.
particularly to do the callback to the Elijah ascension? Is that the argument?
Well, it's in the same author does the story in Luke and in Acts. Subtle differences in the story, right? One, Jesus seems to hang around for a long time. Another one, I said he zip-zips, but it's moving really quickly to give you some closure on the story. So I liked layering the stories. I found them profoundly helpful to sit both ways. Did everything I read point to the same story? No. But some scholars do. So I think there's probably multiple ways. That was just one kind of layering technique that, for me, finally brought this story into a place where I was like, maybe it had been a story that I was like, oh, I don't get it. It's a little strange. And then I was like, no, this is a really rich story that has this prophetic layering to it. So I liked it and wasn't trying to necessarily solve it or bring it all to this really neat place. I don't think that's the point at all. I think the way that these stories and even a Hebrew imagination loves to well, maybe it's like this, maybe it's like this, maybe it's like this. I wanted to offer you a story that you could now sort of sit with and wonder about, ooh, what does this mean if we see Jesus as this new Elijah and ascension means that, he is in more places. Where does Elijah show up in the Gospels, in the Transfiguration, So there's other places. Scott. What do you have to offer?
Just what comes to mind, too, is so this author has this sort of disruptive story about Christ opens us to a continuing story. And one of the things I love is how John's gospel does this in a different way. It sets it up where they go back to a place that they thought they knew. Basically, all the disciples go home, and Jesus is there, cooking food for them on the beach. And I think this is maybe the point, is that the stories are meant to open us up to the story that has continued. There's no Elijah callback, though.
It's great.
It's a great question.
This is a quick one.
Oh, thanks, Pete.
It's kind of on the sermon series anyways, but I'm still a little confused on, should we be looking for joy? Should we be pursuing it? Or is that more of a love thing? I'm still trying to sort that in my brain. And you've been giving me lots of good information, but maybe riff on that a bit.
Pete asked me this question after our time together last week, so I've had a week
I didn't answer it. I guess That's what it means.
Well, one of the things that I like that Bobby mentioned, there's a phrase where she says joy is so egalitarian. How there's no pretentiousness in the way that joy exists. It seems as though a person in the most dire of circumstances can encounter joy. And the person who seems to be living their best life also seems to do this at times. I'm going to just go with my theological gut here. No, I've been thinking about this. I think that joy is just what is. And by that I mean there's a state of being, whether it's God, whether it's goodness. I said something similar. I think it's love. Love is part of it. And joy, our notion of joy is rooted in our encounter or experience, when we happen to be aware of it. And I don't think that's out of line with what you were contending tonight. I actually appreciated, Bobby had this line where she said, and if you don't feel like it's working for you, that's not on you. It's not as though our encounters with joy are somehow rooted in our capacity always to be it's right? As though it's like a lightning strike and we just kind of got to get under it. I like the idea that joy is just what is. It's there. And whenever I happen to be aware of it, then I'm going to call that joy. But it's there before and after and around before I get there.
Yeah, I started this series kind of with a switched definition. I thought happiness was joy and then joy was happiness. And then I was like, ooh, I think I'm changing my mind about that. When I think about this question of how do I get it? How do I get it, joy? I don't think we do. Like, I think there's something really wonderful about openness to all of human emotion, as terrifying as that is for many of us. I know I know myself as angry. What are the other things I'm feeling? But I think the openness to all of human emotion is a gift of what it means to be human. But there's this cool thing it makes me think of. Scott referenced Ross Gay's book of delights last week in his sermon. And you can see Ross Gay as he writes these little essays. He's a poet, but he puts his literal hand to paper, writes them out by hand. And in essays, he just starts saying, delight, delight, delight. It's just the work of pointing it out. Like, I'm riding my bike down a hill, delight. And then I got a muffin from my favorite cafe, delight. And I loved the practice of the openness to all of human experience. That is the gift of what it means to be human, as scary as that is for us, and the cultivation of just naming and noticing it. So I don't think it's something we pull towards us, but I think there are these moments where joy, joy.
Yeah, so when you define joy, you talked about joy being an emotion. It can be very sudden, unexpected. It can be a sign of confusion or uncertainty. And I just wanted to see where you're at in terms of comparing that with biblical verses referencing joy, which say joy does not have to be based in uncertainty because we can expect it even in trials and tribulations. Yeah. That joy is not an emotion because it's rooted in God, not our circumstances or how we think or perceive things. And that joy is not a sign of confusion, although it can go along with the fear or presence of God.
That's lovely, rich. That's a rich question. Thank you for that. One of the cool things about our series, I think, was we really tried to design a survey. So in a survey starting at the beginning of the text, we did Genesis, we did, what did we go next? Prophets, we did Psalms, we landed in the Gospels and Acts, and then Jared's doing epistles. So we really tried to, in 5 weeks, do a bit of a survey of the thing, but we're only scratching the surface. And I think the interesting thing about language is that it's really complicated. The language of the text, were written in something not the language that we speak. So we're taking these words, we are trusting translation, we're doing work with translation. And then we're also taking what we know about the world and our bodies and emotion, and what we've learned through science and all of the 2000s of learning since we closed the canon. So I think that there is a complexity to how we talk about it in a way that really makes sense to us in our everyday, and really stay committed and true and in love with the text in all of its complexity and its ancient inspiration. So yeah, those are some things that makes me think of.
I like how, you sort of put your finger on, what do I do with this notion that Bobby's suggesting, that sometimes joy can appear in a moment where I'm not so sure of what's happening. I might come to see that moment in my life as being presented to me, offered to me, brought to me by God's goodness. But I think we all have plenty of moments where we aren't sure what's happening. Just the picture that came to mind when Bobby was sort of referencing this. So I have 3 kids, and you don't have to have children, I think, to maybe understand this picture. I watched each of them come into the world in very different ways. Each of them, without going into the details, there was a lot of precariousness. And in each of them, there was some doubt. But you couldn't have somehow told me in the middle of all that uncertainty that there wasn't some goodness in that complexity, or that God wasn't the author of what was good, and then also with me in what felt really, really terrifying, especially because I wasn't the one giving birth to these children. And I wonder if that isn't sometimes how our life can feel. It can feel like we're a passive bystander. Life happens to the version of us that's standing over here, and we wish we could pull that person out of it. And I think God is sort of there with us over here as we watch what's happening, what we don't want to see, and then also just there with the part of us that's feeling it all and deeply overwhelmed by what seems to be happening and then there as the source and the like clarion call of joy that emerges as we go through. Or sometimes we don't. Sometimes we're just there. Sometimes we're just stuck. And I think joy can still find us.
Yeah, it does.